It's now my great honor to introduce our next speaker, Senator Roger Wicker, who is a Republican who has represented Mississippi in the U.S. Senate since 2007. He served on active duty in the U.S. Air Force and then joined the Air Force Reserve, retiring from the Reserve in 2004 at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Senator Wicker is the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. A champion for a strong national defense, he authored the Securing the Homeland by Increasing Our Power on the Seas, or SHIPS Act, establishing the goal of a 355-ship Navy to enhance U.S. security and shipbuilding. Recently, he introduced 21st Century Peace Through Strength, a comprehensive plan to rebuild the military and increase defense spending to 5% of GDP, ensuring America is prepared to meet global challenges. Senator Wicker has dedicated his career to supporting the military, fostering American competitiveness, and advocating for policies that strengthen our nation's defense capabilities. Please welcome Senator Roger Wicker.
Thank you much, appreciate it. Put my water here. Thanks for the opportunity to be here, and I wish I had been here earlier to hear the Secretary Del Toro. Let me tell you, those of you who have heard me before know that at an event like this, I usually try to speak off the cuff, and I save my prepared remarks for the Senate floor. I'm going to try to stick to prepared remarks today because I want to make sure I choose my words correctly, and I have a lot that I want to say, and maybe we'll take a question or two. We are certainly here at a pivotal moment for our country, and a pivotal moment in our quest to achieve peace through strength. And this audience knows better than I do that we will need that strength because we find ourselves at an increasingly dangerous time. Dictators for life run 4 adversaries of ours, and they are working together as never before. Tyrants in charge of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are on the move, and they're working together. But just as we find ourselves in a precarious situation, we find ourselves at a turning point. We have a chance to stem the tide of these rising threats, or we can let them escalate. Now is the moment. I have a big poster in my conference room of Winston Churchill. If you come to see me and you're sitting at the table, you'll see Winston Churchill somewhat glaring down at you. In the years before World War II, he talked about a gathering storm. He later wrote about the gathering storm. He was referring, of course, to Nazi Germany. He was referring to the Italians marching on North Africa, and the Japanese were readying their fleet. He also used another phrase called a period of consequences. So, a gathering storm and a period of consequences. The question is, are we at a point of a gathering storm? Today we see an axis of aggressors: China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Their sophistication and collaboration has begun to loom large compared to the threat that we faced and that the Brits faced before World War II. So let's review. Just this year, China used its considerable economic engine to assist Russia. Xi Jinping helped Russian President Putin manufacture materiel. In return, Russia sent submarine technology to China. Beijing appears poised to close the gap in submarine technology, thanks in part to Moscow. This year, we watched Iran-backed Houthis repeatedly target U.S. Navy warships in the Red Sea. What did the Houthis do then? They showed up in Ukraine, turning their fire on Ukrainian cities in Putin's illegal war. So we've seen North Korea send troops to Ukraine. Houthis, North Korea, helping Russia in Ukraine. Reports indicate that the number of troops will rise to an impressive 120,000 in the coming months. Again, Russia has returned the favor. News reports tell us that Putin is likely to send Kim Jong-un first-rate defense technology in exchange for those troops. Iran has received Chinese and Russian help in the forms of surveillance technology, missile defense, and other technical support. As this axis collaborates, it seeks to create something of a spider's web for the United States and for those of us in the West. It hopes to entangle us as the tyrants march on. So this is what we're up against. Will the storm actually gather? When we look back on this period, will there have been a gathering storm? We can make decisions at this point, and I hope we are paused in this new year, in this new opportunity, to avoid the outcome of the storm. Is it a period of consequences? Yes, it is. And in the words of Churchill, the choices Britain made then had consequences, and they will shape the future today, just as they did decades and decades ago when my father was in uniform. We must make the right choices because we are not where we need to be today. We are not where we need to be today, and you don't have to take the word of an elected official for that. Listen to our nation's top military leaders. Listen to former top military leaders from other decades and other administrations. And once you hear as many as I have, you will begin to notice the trends. You get a sense of the big picture. If you put all these together, they paint a picture, and it is not a positive one. Their testimony tells me that we are up against significant challenges and that our national defense is not well equipped to meet the moment. Every member of this axis of aggression poses a threat. Chief among them are China. Led by an aspiring military superpower, its dictator, Xi Jinping. It is not an exaggeration to say that Xi Jinping is actively preparing for war. It is not an exaggeration to say that Xi Jinping is preparing for war against the United States. And of course, he said publicly to his Congress, to be broadcast around the world, that they need to be ready to retake Taiwan by the year 2027. We're on the eve of the year 2025 right now. Last year, the Chinese Navy put 30 hulls in the water, including a carrier. Their shipbuilding capacity is a breathtaking 200 times larger than ours. Their capacity is 200 times larger than ours. China is producing fifth-generation fighters at scale. It's building nuclear weapons faster than we had predicted even recently. In the past decade, they've leapfrogged Russia in space capabilities and long-range missiles. These are public facts. Check them out. Beijing is on the cusp of world-changing abilities in aerospace technology. In the Western Pacific, Chinese forces outnumber and outgun American capabilities. If a conflict erupted, we would be the lesser force on day one. It would take weeks for supporting naval and air assets to arrive. Spending is, of course, not the only measure. I'm told this by a number of my colleagues quite often. But defense spending is one of the measures. It's one of the metrics to measure a country's military strength. It tells us how seriously we take the situation. Last year, China increased its military spending by 7.2%. Meanwhile, under the Biden administration, our defense investment has not even kept up with inflation. In terms of real purchasing, we have begun to spend less and less. And listen, the election is over. I'm not trying to be political here. I'm just stating a fact, and I'm stating something that needs to be rectified. Even in my own party, I have to discuss this fact with people who do not understand that defense spending is at a real problem. And our industrial base has atrophied. In the Second World War, our munition stores, our shipyards, and our arsenals of democracy were the envy of the world. Back then, one family-owned Wisconsin shipyard built 28 submarines in a period of 2 years. I mean, just think about that as compared to what we do today. The entire United States Navy can muster only 1.2 Virginia-class submarines per year in just 2 main shipyards. Back then, it took only 3 days to repair the USS Yorktown, a battered carrier, before deploying it to fight at Midway. Today, there are ships in our fleet that have been waiting for repairs for more than 7 years. I think that's worth repeating. We have American ships that have been awaiting repair for 7 years. These statistics say many things, but 2 conclusions rise to the top. First, we need to take proper care of our fleet, and at the same time, we need to revitalize American military might. And we need to get started today. America is a maritime power, and America is an aerospace power. We have remained free and preeminent because we've had command of the oceans for 2 centuries, and we've had command of the skies since the mid-40s. A complicated set of institutions have made that possible for a long time. They cover everything from shipyards and factories to college campuses and the Wall Street trading floor. These and other institutions have allowed America to become a military superpower. We achieved such strength because the entire nation got on board when we had to. That's our heritage as Americans, and it ought to be our model going forward. Our military leaders understood this. Admiral Nimitz once noted, quote, "There's scarcely a village in the geographical center of the continent which does not contribute in some way to American sea power." We've moved a little away from that. We need to get back to that. We need to give every constituency, every state in our country a stake in unlocking the great industrial powerhouse of our country. Otherwise, we cannot hope to build consensus around rebuilding our Navy and our military more broadly. Now, I hope many of you know, and I appreciate the mention in the introduction, that this year I published a plan to get us there in my role as ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. It's a decision based on very much input that I've received from around the country. I intend to use that as I assume the chairmanship of the Armed Services Committee after the 3rd of January. And it's clear to me, based on the big picture that we paint in my report, that 3% of GDP falls far short. President Reagan's military buildup, which got us almost to 600 ships, is long gone. For the next few years, we need to go back to following Ronald Reagan's lead by matching his spending levels. That investment will lead to a host of programs benefiting the Air Force, the Navy, our nuclear capabilities, and our defense capabilities in general. When it comes to the surface fleet, we must change the way the Navy does business. I think this this audience in particular understands the problems with the Navy's business practices. But let me just summarize a few. We have the smallest fleet we've had in over 100 years. Soon we'll have the oldest fleet in that same time frame. Surface combatants will be more than 20 years old on average. Older ships are being kept online longer, making it more expensive to sustain. In 1997, it cost $15 million on average to maintain ships. Today, in constant dollars, it costs over $50 million. Industry might not be perfect, but only a poor craftsman blames the tools. We need, as a country, as a government, as industry, to look at the common thread underlying shipbuilding struggles: the Navy bureaucracy. The Navy has not yet improved as a customer, regulator, and technical authority. Until it does, the Navy must take responsibility for repeated episodes of acquisition malpractice. So, let's illustrate a broader point. In the last several years, the Navy authorized moving forward with the Constellation-class frigate program. The Constellation design was expected to have commonality with European designs, 85% commonality. This would make it rapidly producible. But what happened? In the end, after a number of changes, the designs had just 15% commonality. In any industry, it's hard for a provider to deliver for a customer that cannot make up its own mind. That is especially hard when that provider is building our nation's most sophisticated weaponry. In the coming administration, we have an opportunity. We have a real opportunity to change the way the Navy does business, to make it more transparent as a client, and to give our shipyards the demand signal they desperately need. But we are not reforming the Navy's business practices just for fun. We need to do so in order to get a larger fleet. Both history and the threat at hand convince us that our Navy must grow. We are asking our current force to protect free and open sea lanes. We're asking them to forward deploy in 3 dangerous theaters that are increasingly dangerous. And we're preparing for a potential high-intensity conflict, all at the same time. And we've been doing this as we leave the surface fleet in a near-death spiral. Longer deployments followed by even more maintenance. It's no wonder why accidents have been happening more often. A larger fleet would give us options and flexibility. It would also serve as a blunt instrument of American strength. It would help our enemies understand our capabilities. A few years ago, I authored and the President signed the Ships Act. That law set a fleet size minimum for the Navy. It is now a statutory requirement that we have a 355 ship Navy, and I can assure you the Congress did not arrive at that number. The Congress chose a number given to us by the admirals and generals who are out there trying to protect the country. We need to reach this amount before it's too late. Building 41 new ships over the next 10 years. 41 new ships over the next 10 years. No small task. We're headed in the right direction when it comes to our submarine industrial base. We're sending the right demand signal, and we ought to do the same with the rest of the shipbuilding industry. Doing so would help us close the shipbuilding gap. So we must increase the fleet size. We must send the right demand signals to industry. We must also be innovative. In that spirit, I have proposed a small surface combatant. It would be attritable, but armed to the teeth with some of our best precision missiles. It would be producible today, and we could make them by the dozens, and the way we had hoped to do for the Constellation class. Small, uncrewed, attritable surface combatants. The innovation mindset is a classic American trait. It leads me to a final way we can build the Navy strong enough to deter China. We must make big bets on emerging technology, both large and small. On the large side, there's AUKUS, a great achievement of the past administration. We need to make good on our AUKUS agreement. Actually, we need to supercharge our AUKUS agreement. I've been pleased to see substantial attention directed toward our submarine industrial base through AUKUS. Let's build on that progress to get more submarines out to sea faster. Today, our Virginia program is an output of just 1.2 per year. 1.2 Virginia-class subs per year. With the right mix of investments, incentives, and attention, we must get that number to above 2 per year. We will continue building the best-in-class platforms for our sailors and crew, and of course, uncrewed technology is rapidly maturing. We should augment the manned vessels with uncrewed tools. We'll have to invest in lower-cost alternatives, such as small and medium uncrewed warships and undersea vehicles. Some of these technologies are primed to change the battle space in short order. One day we'll be able to operate these platforms alongside our traditional ships, which will create a formidable 1-2 punch. These platforms can be bought by the hundreds, they can be attrited, they are affordable, they are expendable, and they are a real bear for our adversaries to detect. We should improve our odds in that kind of fight. Large or small, we must build this fleet by the mid-2030s. It will take a full team to do that. I know you're all on board, and I'm pleased to say that we have a great team in government to put us forward on this goal. The new chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee will be Senator Collins of Maine. She understands the situation, and so does Senator Lindsey Graham on budget. Senator McConnell will be leading the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, and he's on board with this project. As a matter of fact, he's been one of the principal champions speaking out in favor of my report. Our incoming Senate Majority Leader, Senator John Thune, wants to help, and my colleagues in the House, Speaker Johnson, Chairman Rogers, are defense hawks and ready to pitch in. And my friends in the Trump administration know the stakes, and they know what we need to do, and we're certainly working with them as much as we possibly can and having conversations with them almost every day. So we have a varsity team. They'll be ready as soon as the whistle blows, which will be actually now. In the coming weeks, I will be focused on how we can use the reconciliation process to begin this military rebuild. The reconciliation budget process to begin this military rebuild. This is a generational opportunity, and we need to get started as soon as possible. I hope Congress will pursue our shared work of peace through strength. It's time to get this done. Thank you very much for having me. I'll take questions from either this section or this section, but not that section. I'm just kidding. Comment? Oh, yes. Hello.
Senator Gregory Glaros, you mentioned, and everyone is agreeing with the number of ships that need to be built and its manning. But what about legislation that would encourage our allies, such as Australia, to stop shipping iron ore to China and to put high tariffs on steel exported from China itself? Cut them off at the source rather than just competing with them in the numbers.
Well, will that take legislation, or can it be done by executive, in your opinion?
I think it's both from that standpoint, to support the current president-elect that we have, but to make it more enduring beyond any administration. China receives over 80% of its iron ore from our ally, Australia. Yet are we going to continue to fight against our own allies economically, or how can we support them and get rid of that iron ore?
Thank you for bringing that up. That is an issue that has not yet come to my attention, so I do appreciate that.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you. A really smart friend of mine who grew up in the acquisition community of the Navy tells me that the technology community and the acquisition community in the Navy accept zero risk. And as a result of that, all the risk gets passed down to the operational forces. And they waive this instruction called DOD 5000, which is the federal acquisition regulations, and as their protection for accepting no risk. And again, the operational forces take it all. This is a suggestion along the same lines. We really need to review that DOD 5000, get the regulations right, and pass the risk, push the risk back on the acquisition community and the technical community, so it's not all on the operational forces.
A shared risk.
Shared risk. In the technical community, you can say no. The acquisition community is protected by those regulations. And so we have ships that are tied up for 7 years waiting for maintenance.
And let me ask you, are you talking to anybody in the incoming administration about this?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, again, two very significant suggestions, and I hope to continue a conversation with each of you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senator. Don Klein, retired naval aviator. I'm going to ask you an unglamorous question, and that's our capability to actually repair our ships forward in the event of conflict. Battle damage repair is a huge, dirty, dangerous task, and currently we would have to cycle ships back to Conus or Guam, which itself is going to be in a contested environment. Has the Navy provided you any studies to show what it would take to kind of reconstitute that repair ship afloat capability to take it forward, much like we did everywhere across the Pacific during World War II? Thank you.
The Navy has not suggested that to me. It might be that the Secretary could help me respond to that, and I would very much appreciate that.
Yes, sir. So right now, actually, one issue that's been kind of going back and forth for the last couple of years is the retirement of ESDs, and I have not been a proponent necessarily to retire those ESDs, but to actually turn them into heavy lift ships. So that, and there's a proposal that we're looking at in the Navy to actually just make an investment of about $20 million, and we could actually turn those into ESDs for heavy lift ships that would be very useful should a conflict come in the future. But if I may just take a moment, sir, I know you said you wouldn't take any questions from this side.
No, actually.
But I want to share a comment with you.
But I believe the question was about repair facilities west of Guam.
Yeah, so there is legislative proposals to actually increase the number of voyage repairs that the Navy can conduct overseas, and that's very, very useful because we want to determine which shipyards right now we could actually work with before a conflict should arrive, so we know exactly where to be able to send those ships. So I hope that that's one proposal that actually gets passed in legislation in the future, so we can have more shipyard voyage repairs in shipyards where we know we may need them. So.
And do you have any suggestions as to precisely where that might be?
No, sir. I think my question was really about in conflict, because we may or may not be able to rely upon fixed shipyards. And then back in the 80s, during the era of the Reagan buildup, we had ARs, repair ships of various sizes and capabilities that could be easily moved around within the theater. And I think on disaggregating and maybe going to a smaller design, much like you're talking about with SSC, is have multiple out there to be able to do 80% of the battle damage repair, so that within the realms of technology, we can do a quick return to battle, much like what you illustrated with the repair of the Yorktown prior to Midway. Thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. Yes, sir.
So the one comment I wanted to make, Senator, and I really do appreciate our service together this past 3.5 years, is thank you for your support on NAV ski yachts. That is an issue that you and I have very aggressively supported, and I appreciate all the additional funding and support you provided for that.
Thank you very much, sir. And yes, it has been rewarding.
Yes, sir.
To make some accomplishments. One more question?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Good morning, Senator. Tina L.A. I'm asking as a private citizen. So, continuing resolutions have been documented as drivers of delays in contracting and execution. So, if a private shipyard that's fixing one of our DDGs has to wait for a contract in April, that means they're 6 months behind. There's been documentation from the Navy and a study by MITRE that showed that for RCOHs, which are the midlife overhauls for aircraft carriers, continuing resolutions have driven significant growth and cost and delays. Would the legislator be willing to consider shielding the ship industrial base and shipbuilding, ship repair from the limitations of continuing resolutions?
Well, I think continuing resolutions are terrible, and they have the precise negative effect that you mentioned and more. And as a matter of fact, this particular continuing resolution, which regrettably we seem to be stuck with, will do more harm to defense than to domestic programs. So it's a question of leadership. It's a question of bringing legislation to the floor, and without being personal. There in the United States Senate, there is one individual who brings legislation to the floor, and that is the majority leader. We'll soon have a new majority leader, but for whatever reason, perhaps because of the election, perhaps because of other considerations, issues that did not bode well for one party or the other, the majority leader this year has been unwilling to bring the NDAA to the floor, except for the two fairly procedural take it or leave it votes that we'll take next week, and also has engineered through his majority a series of appropriations measures that have not been able to get us to actual appropriation bills and stuck us with a continuing resolution. Continuing resolutions do not save money; they waste money, and I regret that some members of my own party in the House and Senate have been responsible also for calling for continuing resolutions. They need to be avoided. I hope the new leadership, with working in the Senate now, as most Americans do, 5 days a week, week after week after week, we can move legislation and do things through regular order. Folks, listen, I've got a great staff. One of them's here. But we listen to people. We meet with dozens of people every week. We value your input, and the suggestions we've had today. We have taken notes, and we'll get back to you about that. We need your help, but I hope you agree we are not where we need to be, and I need the help of constituencies and people who've done this forever and ever to help us get to the position where peace is achieved because we're so strong. Thank you very much.
Senator Wicker, I just want to thank you for your leadership in the Senate, and thank you for your future leadership of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Despite your Air Force background, I hope you're rooting for the right team this weekend. But as a small token of our appreciation, the Neptune Factor by Nicholas A. Lambert,
Thank you.
Institute Press.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.